Pastorale di Natale, which I translate as the shepherd's song of the birth. Very important Italian Christmas carol.
So we're here with Sean Folsom, who just played the Italian zampogna, which is the Southern Italian bagpipe. And Sean is a friend of mine, and he's also the person who helped me get started in learning this instrument back about 5 years ago.
Did a real good job.
So Sean, tell us a little bit about your involvement with the zampogna. When did you start playing it? How did you get involved? What is your connection to the instrument?
One of the interesting things was I had already started playing the Scottish bagpipes in 1970, and in 1972 I bought a catalog of the Pitt Rivers Museum collection. Pitt Rivers was really a great 19th century English collector of just about everything, like Mercer in Philadelphia. Canon Galpin, who was a collector of musical instruments, gave the museum all these bagpipes, and Anthony Baines, who was a leading oboe player with the London Philharmonic, in 1960 he compiled a catalog of the exhibition of pipes at Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford, England. And I bought this book, and I was reading through it, and I was reading about zampognas and everything, but I had never heard one play, either recording or whatever. About 1973, I met a friend of mine, Dennis Brooks, who was also my bagpipe guru, and he had recordings. So I got to hear what a zampogna, how beautiful they sounded. And then in 1977, I met Robert Donovan Thomas. Now, Robert Donovan Thomas had done a tour of Italy in the 60s, 1964.
You were in California at the time.
Yes, this is all in California.
Mm-hmm.
And Robert Donovan Thomas, or Robert D. Thomas, who was a big friend of the Grateful Dead and Owsley and all of this, he did a lot of album covers for the Grateful Dead, and he did the Skull with the Lightning thing through it, a lot of these icons of the Grateful Dead. Anyway, Robert was a very fine artist, and he had been matriculated through the Navy School of Music in Washington, D.C. as a tuba player, which wouldn't give you an idea that he would have any affinity for reed instruments, but he did. And consequently, I have one of his pipes from that tour of Italy in 1964. It's made by Oliva in Sicily, and this came to me. Bob was trying to sell off his collection starting in the early 1980s, and a friend of mine, Ted Anderson, bought it, and then his wife didn't like the goatskin bags, so he had to sell it to me for basically what he paid for it. And around 1982, I also got a hold of one of the Acchiavi pipes from Scapoli, and I ended up playing, I was playing for Irish Fathers at Sacred Heart Parish in San Jose, and their housekeeper, Nancy Linus, who was part of the Italian community in San Jose, realized that I played the zampogna and said, well, you have to play for Father Ephraim Tradle he was a Franciscan from San Francisco, who was going to do Santa Lucia Day this following day.
How did you actually, now you bought your first bagpipe from a friend in California, but you were playing other types of bagpipes
before the
zampogna. It's not like you just
yes.
happened into playing the zampogna, because it's not an instrument that you can just pick up like a guitar with minimal and start playing some chords on it. It's something that requires a fairly deep knowledge of reed making and tuning, and
all of
how to do all that. So you've been playing you started on the Scottish bagpipe, is that correct?
Yes, and then the Northumbrian pipes, and then the Irish pipes in 1973. I started making reeds at about that time, and making my own reeds made it possible for me to have a large working collection like I do today.
And how would you explain the difference, as someone who plays bagpipes from all over the world, different cultures, how do you explain the difference between the Italian zampogna versus, say, the Scottish bagpipe or the Irish uilleann pipe?
Well, they fulfill the same needs in their communities. Music for the dance, sacred music, various other things. And in the days before recorded music, if you didn't have an instrument that you played, whatever it was, a fiddle, a violin, or a bagpipe or anything like that, there was no music. So people entertained themselves, and they learned to play, and in some ways, all of this was shepherds. They would train their flocks to come with them when they played certain tunes, and to gather on the shepherd when they played other tunes, and so on, and essentially communicate over certain distances with other shepherds. So it had its own niche for practical purposes, actually, in that case, for signaling and all that. So I would say that there are differences, but there's more similarities than there are differences. Just off the top of my head, the sociology of it is that since we've gone into modern times, a lot of this became considered to be really old-fashioned and started falling away, started dying. Of course, what saved Scottish bagpipes is the whole British military thing, but a lot of the other bagpipes were in danger of disappearing entirely. That's not true now. And what I'd like to say about that is our folk revival in the 50s spurred a folk revival in Britain, which spurred ultimately a folk revival on the continent. And if you look at the history of American recording industry, the earliest recordings of ethnic music were done in New York, and they had zamponias, and they had all kinds of things, both on Edison cylinders and on 78s. And in order to get people to buy the equipment, and they would say, well, you want to listen to songs of your homeland, we're offering all this in our catalog. And then as soon as they bought the equipment, then they shoved the popular music at them. And so finally, you didn't have so much ethnic recording. Although, like I say, the earliest ethnic recording was here in this country. Mm-hmm. And Italians, Greeks, Irish, you name it, all recorded their instruments on this media. And most people in the recording industry do not know this story, but there it is.
You have 3 different bagpipes here. Now, they all look slightly different from one another.
Yeah, they're different. One of the things about bagpipes is they're usually organized around voices. So people normally sing with these things, and they some bagpipes in certain keys favor male voices. Other bagpipes in other keys help accompany female voices. So this is a big thing about the human voice. It has such a range, and the range is illustrated on these pipes. This is high pitched, this is low pitched, this is somewhere in between. Mm-hmm. And
they also reflect different regional variations. Yes. In the evolution of the instrument.
And that's because people were free to make their own adjustments, and somebody would see a shepherd playing a pipe in one area and say, I can make one of those, and he would carve his own pipe, and he would put his fingers just on the instrument, and where he was comfortable with his fingers, that's where the holes went. Mm-hmm. It wasn't very scientific or anything, but it was definitely got him down the road.
Now, you started out playing the Sicilian bagpipe over here. That's the one you've been playing the longest.
Yes, I got a hold of a pipe made in California by Brian Steger, and it needed a lot of work, and it was really tough to play and keep in tune. But that was my first zamponia in 1979.
Okay.
And then this I got in 1984. I gave away the Brian Steger pipe to a Scottish piper and said, good luck.
Do you want to play? Would you like to play?
Yeah, let's
play.
Yeah,
and let us
sure.
Hear it?
Unfortunately, the reeds are giving me trouble.
See if it's in. Maybe you can tune it up first.
So only certain notes are out, but it's pretty hard to play right now. Mm-hmm. It's not perfect. This one has a story behind it in that sometime around 1986 I became aware of 2 sets of pipes that Brian Steger had, and he was trying to work on them, never really got them going. And I contacted the fellow whose grandfather had come to Helper, Utah from Calabria. And his name, the man's name that owned the pipes is Francesco Stella, but it's his grandfather, Giorgio, that had the pipes. And this is made after, by Hector Bazanas of San Francisco, made after the one that Giorgio Stella carved in the 1920s in Helper, Utah. Mm-hmm. And I was able to get both sets of pipes going. I think Francesco has given them to an Italian museum in Helper, Utah. It's near Grand Junction, Colorado. But it turns out that a lot of Calabrian miners were hired by Anaconda Copper. And they came out, and in addition to having miners, they had the shepherd, Giorgio, playing the zamponia. And he was a very essential part of any fun that was had by Italians in that community up until 1956 when he passed away. So I felt very blessed that I actually met and got these pipes going. And this wax pick is a wax pick from Giorgio Stella. So it's got a little, a little bit of blessing from his grandson. And this is, they say about the Calabrese that they were so poor they never threw anything away, and that included the bagpipe. And I know Leon Panetta's son, Christopher, and I said, okay, now I'm going to play the Panetta bagpipe. You know who Panetta is, Leon Panetta. Anyway, he's from Monterey. All the Isola de Femina, the island of the women people, moved to Monterey years ago and were part of the whole Cannery Row sardine fishing fleet and all of that.
What kind of tune was that, Sean?
Well, that's my attempt at a Calabrian, North Calabrian tarantella.
Okay. And now what exactly is the tarantella?
Well, if you go back far enough to read about the dance crazes of the Middle Ages, and that includes St. Vitus dance, which was a big thing in German states. It turns out that It turns out that Italy and various other parts of Europe were under a lot of pressure from the church to get rid of all their wise people, whether women or men, that exhibited any kind of supernatural or inclination to the supernatural. And I think that along with that repression, people needed to have an escape valve, something to relieve the pressure of this particular thing. Now, of course, in the church at Pietropolo in Calabria, they have a 3-day Tarantismo event where the pipers play, and they basically do ecstatic worship, which is not uncommon. You've got the holy rollers, you've got all kinds of stuff in Africa, and it turns out that not particularly the tunes or the sound, but the long duration can put you in a state where, especially if you've been up 3 nights running with no sleep, well, your own body produces all the chemicals you need to be in an ecstasy. And certainly, right now, there are some New Age people in Italy that are pursuing the whole Tarantismo thing as a New Age cure-all.
But more practically, the tarantella is just the folk dance of Southern Italy.
That's right. And since the 19th century, tarantella is essentially a dance. Although, like I say, in certain places in Italy, they still have the part. Well, supposedly, there's a spider that would bite you, and you would have to dance off the poison, and you only started dancing when you heard your tune. And the musicians would play through the repertoire, and when you felt like they were playing your tune, you started dancing. And you might dance and dance and dance, and of course there's steps. It's not just free-form frigging around, of course,
Right.
but there are steps.
It's also used for the contra dance, which is a social a way for people to get to meet each other in the culture for young people to interact in a responsible setting.
Exactly.
And dance with each other.
And so forget all that stuff I just said about the tarantella. I have been around a lot of people over the years that, really interesting and difficult people who know all do this stuff.
You're not an Italian American, but you obviously play this Italian instrument. I know you've had a lot of interaction with the Italian American community. Explain the Zampogna's role in the Italian American community, and also explain your interaction with Italian culture. I know you've actually also been to Italy to play. They invited you to come and play in Italy. So
that was my big.
That was your big.
That was my big moment.
Talk a little bit about the Zampogna in America and your kind of interaction with that in Italian American groups, and then tell us about your trip to Italy and the significance of that for you.
Well, here's the deal. The Italian community, for the most part, will bring, now he's departed, Luciano Pavarotti, way before they would ever bring over a Zampagnaro. It's because of this whole association with poverty and misery and the mezzogiorno. And so a lot of the Italian community in the United States have been wanting to forget about this. It's too much of the peasant, of the paisan of the countryside, all of that kind of thing. And so it's only recently that they've become proud of it, which has been a big relief because it means more jobs for me. Now, the thing about the Italian community when they first started coming here, and Italians started coming here about the 1850s, and there were Italian plasterers in Chicago, and they were stonemasons and all of this kind of thing. And they brought their bagpipes with them. And so there was, by the time, say, 1817, they had a huge Zampogna band in Little Italy in New York. And you just have to say, wow, how wonderful that they had all these people playing this instrument. Now, over the years, subsequent immigration, there were more people immigrating, and they continued to bring over pipes, and here and there and here and there. And so this particular pipe here was in upstate New York. I don't know the man's name that owned it, but this pipe, the fellow died. This pipe went to a fellow in the Scottish community because he's a bagpiper. That bagpiper gave it to another guy in Connecticut named Mike McNinch. So I'm up in Vermont at this bagpipe festival, which used to happen every year in Vermont, and I saw this and I said, well, this is obviously pipe like what Bob Thomas played. Besides, Bob Thomas had about 4 different Zampognas, including this Sicilian. He had one that he said was more or less from Monte Cassino and had slightly different shapes on the bells and was high-pitched and so on. And then he had another one that was kind of like a much smaller version of the Sicilian pipe. And anyway, this type of pipe, I said, oh, wow, look at that, Mike McNinch needed a Bulgarian pipe, so I traded in the Bulgarian pipe for this. And then I had to send this part to Italy, and a maker that I met over in Scapoli made this whole new section, which the original was busted off and had a big crack through it. And the bell disassembles. So I sent him a gun drill, a 6mm gun drill, which is really good for long hole boring, because the cutting edge is right at the tip, and it's hollow, and you have air. This is rotating, and you have the drill, and you force it through, and as it goes through it, the chips fly out because of air pressure going through the drill.
Explain a little bit about your trip to Italy. You went there in 1996, I know, and you were invited to go there by an organization that was sort of helping with the Zampogna revival.
Exactly.
And now, how did they find out about you? Why did they invite you? And
they found out about me by Lionel Batari and a fellow named John Luca, not your John Luca that's going to be in an interview, but another John Luca who was very interested in Zamponia. So he did an interview with me that was put in their journal. They had a quarterly journal, the Circolo della Zamponia, and or Circle of the Zamponia. And they did this big article because they wanted to promote me as something really unusual from Stati Uniti. And so I got out there, and people couldn't get over the fact that I did all this stuff, and I took 20 sets of pipes, and one group from Rome that was from Channel 3 in Rome, they interviewed me, and they said, so you play Zamponia? And I said, sì, suonare la Zamponia per tutti. And then they said, do you have any Italian heritage? And I said, no, ma sono italiano in altra vita, but I was Italian in another life. And that cracked them up. And so they had that on the Italian TV for 3 nights running. And I got my 15 seconds of fame, you see. Andy Warhol was completely wrong. It's not 15 minutes, it's 15 seconds.
So tell me, you've been involved with the Zamponia since the early 80s.
That's right.
So you've kind of seen, you've been involved in it. Most people in the U.S., you're kind of one of the early people to sort of in the revival of the instrument to pick it up. Now it's 2012. What has changed since the early 80s with the Zamponia?
Well, one thing is there's been more makers over in Italy, very active.
And also in America, I mean, tell me.
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, Steger turns out the odd instrument, and then he tells people to contact me about getting it to play, and I really resent that. But anyway, I do love Brian.
In terms of the consciousness of the instrument amongst Italian Americans, the number of players that are playing now. I mean, obviously I play, and there's a couple of the younger people.
The more recent Italian immigrants really know it.
Yeah.
And they'll come up to me and they'll say, like I'm at the North Beach Italian Fair, and the only thing Italian is me playing the Zamponia, and this guy comes up and he says, this is the only Italian thing at this whole fair. And I said, well, somebody's got to do it.
I've had Italians tell me that too when I've been playing at Italian American festivals.
Yeah.
Well, we still have some time here. I know you have another instrument with you. It's not a Southern Italian instrument, but I believe it's played in parts of northern Italy.
That's right.
And also in France. This is an instrument that's somewhat similar to a Zamponia, but instead of having reeds, it has strings.
That's right.
So explain this, and let's hear what it sounds like.
Played the bagpipes in France, and this is a French instrument, but there are many different makers in Italy now making these, both guitar-shaped and lute-shaped. So this is like the bowl of a bowback mandolin. The guitar shape kind of projects a little bit better than these. It's a little bit louder, but this one has got that really great sound. And in Italian it's called Lira, ghironda, wire turning around. And a brief explanation of how it works. The wheel is rosin like a violin bow. Then there's a moving bridge here. It's a little bridge that's loose, that when I jog the crank, the wheel momentarily speeds up, and the bridge buzzes. So that's as many coups as you can put in, or blows. That's the rhythm. And then these keys shorten the melody strings. So there are 2 melody strings on this instrument. It's in the key of D, and they're in octaves. So this is D just above middle C, and this is D an octave higher. Everything else is D as well, and it plays in the key of D and in G, which I kind of call it cross key or plagal. Anyway,
play us a tune.
Yeah, one of the tunes, Ray Gallardon, from the playing of La Chappa Russa, which is a great band from northern Italy, from the Piemontese, and it's they have a Lira Gironda, they have the North Italian piffero and accordion thing, and they really wonderful band, La Chappa Russa. Both of those are North Italian tunes. Ray Gallardon, the words are, it's kind of Lord Randall. There's an English ballad where the guy says, my girlfriend has poisoned me, and I've got to go and lie down and die. And it's this whole thing. Billy Boy is a real, down home version. Did she bake you a Christmas pie, Billy Boy? So anyway, Ray Gallardon is about, a lover poisoning you, which is kind of a pretty bad thing to do. And then the other one, of course, is a little Giga, and yeah, and they play these now all over the North, and they do a wonderful job. They do a wonderful job with it.
Well, Sean, thank you
Yeah.
so much for
My
sharing
pleasure, David.
your music and your knowledge of it.
Thank you.
I know that you've been very involved in world music and particularly Italian music in the United States. And personally for me, you've not only been a good friend, but you've been a mentor and a teacher. And I know that your work has helped spread this music and really created an awareness in it. And that's something that I know any kind of folk musician is indebted to you for the work you've done. So
My favorite thing is you went to to Amatrice and you got that bagpipe, and now you play it so well. I am
Thank
so
you.
proud of you and
Thank
that
you.
bagpipe. And then of course your thing with the Chiavi.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's wonderful.
Yeah, well, I don't think I would have been able to make the progress with the Zampogna without your help.
Oh, thank
And
you.
you've been very generous. Sean taught me how to make bagpipe reeds, and he's always been available for helping me with the instrument. And and he's done that for more than just myself. He's done that with a lot of people in the community of folk musicians. So
But here's the difference. David actually makes his own reeds now. So and that's the whole point of it. You see, I'd rather not make reeds. And when I get somebody going who can make their own reeds, then it's like I'm free. Because otherwise I go, okay, you got a big gig coming up. I better make your job. Every year I used to make reeds for this one guy who toured around with his wife, Keith and Rusty McNeil.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a Zampogna in F. And in order for him to do the tour, every fall, I had to get the bagpipe, and they'd ship it up from Riverside. I'd tune it up, and then I'd send it, and then they'd go out on this Christmas music tour.
Mm-hmm.
And then ultimately I said, what you need is a Sertolina. So I got him the Sertolina. But anyway, it was every year I was making reeds for these people. So
well, I think we'll end it there. And thank you so much, Sean.
Thank you, Mark. David. David Marker, ladies and gentlemen.